Hello, Billionauts. This is a maybe not so long, but certainly rambling video about writing. I basically felt like I was left with a sense of inconclusiveness after yesterday's video with Steve Donaghy, and I wanted to address a couple of things. I felt like perhaps on the video that we made, we didn't get to address certain things when it comes to writing because there were a lot of technical problems. Well, I'm also not fully comfortable with the video call format, with like communicating with a person through a screen. Um, and we just didn't have the time as well. Zoom doesn't allow us the time to address everything that I wanted to address and on the depth that maybe those things deserved. But there is something that might have come through on the video, which is that Steve and I have two different worldviews, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. There is different types of writers, and I feel like as a writer myself, because I do consider myself a writer, there's a couple of questions that you need to ask yourself before even beginning to write. And one is, why do you want to write? And the other one is, what do you want to write? And the what will tell you who you are, basically, as a writer. If you know what you want to write, then you will know the type of writer that you want to be. And I think that, in a sense, was kind of like on the background of our conversation because we are two different types of writers. Steve is he's a deadline writer. He's a very prolific book reviewer. I failed to address that on the video, but he's a book reviewer basically, and he's a deadline writer. He is used to writing a certain amount of words every day, and maintaining that constancy, right? Because writing and reading and books are his sole and absolute priority, as well as Frida. In my case, I don't have that sense of accountability towards anyone, and what I want to write is very different. I first of all, I have two kinds of things. I have the things that I write for the sake of them, just basically the things that I'm writing for the sake of learning more about writing, about the craft, the things that get me closer to the thing that I actually want to write, and the thing that I want to write. Every writing exercise that you have seen me do in this channel, or that I do and share, are exercises. That's what they are. They are experiments. They are me playing with a new genre, with a new project, moving up and down, which makes it look like I'm like, not committed to anything. That's not true. I have many commitments that have nothing to do with writing. You just know the book part of my life. But I have the other thing that I also want to write, which is the thing that I mainly want to write, which is basically a single book. It's a book that I would like to write at some point, in which I will be able to look back at some point, not at some point, at any point in my life, including my deathbed, and be like, that is the best thing I could do. This book is the thing that truly represents the best I can do. With my material conditions and my cognitive capacity and my specific background, with all of that, this is the best I could do. I want to write that book. I want to write that book very hard, and the fact that I don't think that's the first thing, to get closer to writing that book. I don't think that I need to be publishing. I don't think that I need to be following anyone's deadlines. I just need to be practicing, and also I need to be living, because writing a book like that takes a lot more than just writing a skill. I feel like I know examples of people who, wanting to write that kind of book, they decided to spend the next 10 years only doing that. And what happened is that that book felt like a fuel without a fire. They were writing for writing and writing and writing, but they were not adding life experience to their own embodied lives, which led to a book that didn't really have space to breathe. I don't think that writing is a discipline like any other. I don't think that you can write in the same way that you do indoor plumbing, and that, which means that in a sense that writing does require a certain kind of inspiration. It does require a certain kind of baggage, and the kind of book that you want to write requires a different kind of baggage. Each book is contextually. And the kind of book that I want to write requires the baggage of a single lifetime, but my lifetime, which is more than a single lifetime, requires, someone having done, experienced, and lived everything that that person could. So I carry this book along with me. It's not something I'm writing in English, it's something I'm writing in Spanish. And everything else that I write is either an exercise to get closer to it, or maybe even a sketch of a specific part of it. And sometimes I do approach the book directly, but it's not something that I have any rush to write. I could rush it because, you know, we can all die tomorrow, especially in the light of the Memento Mori tag. But I just don't think I could. I could write books that I'm happy with right now, but I just don't want to write books that I'm happy with. I want to write that book. And every other thing that I write, if I happen to write something that I find cool, that I feel like, oh, I'm happy with this, then I publish that thing. I send it to a friend who has a university magazine, or I send it to a couple of poets in Spain that have that are publishing a collective poetry collection, or, you know, or I maybe read it aloud here whenever that happens. But or if it's a longer thing, you know, like I'm in somewhere and I feel like I want to make a documentary out of this, because I'll write a script for that. But that other thing can only be written once I feel like I am satisfied with the amount of experience in life that I've had. Until then, I will not even be able to begin the stage of correcting, because it's not just writing the book, it's not just sketching everything and plotting and creating the structures that you need to fill with content, but it's also about like then endlessly rewriting and editing and correcting until it genuinely feels like you cannot improve that thing, until it genuinely feels like finally I just don't know how to make this better, and then maybe wait 10 years and see if then you can improve it, and then maybe consider publishing that thing. So single book, which makes me not a professional writer, which is not to say I'm not an uncommitted writer or anything like that. I would happily approach writing professionally, but I would not be approaching the thing that I write professionally in the same way that I'm approaching this thing. They are two separate things. I can do anything professionally. I'm a very versatile person. But the thing that I want to write does determine my priorities. And my priorities are, well, first, the things that I don't need is I don't need to be committed to like achieving crazy numbers of readers or selling at all. I just need to be able to achieve a point in which that thing becomes available to other people. And I definitely, I don't want deadlines or Patreons, basically. I don't want anyone telling me how I should be writing, not when it comes to that thing. I would happily become a deadline writer as a way of getting more practice for what I actually want to write, but it would be a secondary thing. You know, I do like writing, but I like many other things. Writing itself as an act, I like as much as, as much as climbing or surfing. Writing that thing is something entirely different. It's just something entirely different. As I said, it's not. I don't think that you can approach writing like someone approaches indoor plumbing. I think that to be a writer is also an approach to the way you live, and you need to fuel that, to feed that as well. And I don't want anyone for that I'm writing for a deadline or that I'm accountable towards because it's somehow funding me, to have a say in the way I present what I write when it comes to that thing. In the way I present myself to the world. I want absolute freedom for that. Not even a bit of jiggle room. I want absolute freedom. I don't want to have to be conditioned by my desires of any certain kind of attention or to survive a certain kind of censorship or to want a type of reaction. I don't want that to be the thing that decides what I'm writing and how I'm doing it. So there's that. And that leads me to the priorities. I know what I want. I know more or less how to achieve it. What do I need? I need, and this reminds me to Joe Spivey's recent video on A Room of One's Own. He made a review of that book. When I read it, it was one of the very few times in my life that I had a room of my own. So maybe I didn't value the book, or I didn't feel as important to me as it does now. For most of my life, I've never had a room of my own. I haven't even had a bed of my own. So I am very aware of the necessity of a certain kind of independence, financial, social, emotional, and spatial, from everything around you. The kind of I gained a kind of freedom when I left my house so young, but I lost another type of freedom. I needed to work. I needed to embody certain professions, and that meant that suddenly my writing time was conditioned by that. It became secondary, as I said before. Secondary doesn't mean less important. It just means that it does mean less important to a degree, actually, if you look at it that way. But since there is two types of writing, and the one that I actually want to write is something that just can't happen at the moment. Like, it just can't be fully realized at the moment. It's just, you come in and out, and it's precisely these things that keep me away from writing, that fuel my capacity to write, that fuel my writing desire, or whatever. In terms of achieving that independence, well, I've been doing that. First of all, I become financially and socially and economically and emotionally independent precisely by traveling and getting many projects. I like dedicating 100% of myself for a short period of time to different projects, right? I learned English in a couple of months. I learned other languages in a couple of months. I also became a professional diving instructor in a couple of months. I became a professional surf instructor in a single month, without having ever surfed before, which basically means that now I have a certain freedom. I'm not attached to anyone or to any job or anything like that. I don't have the kind of insecurity that other people has, that they need to maintain their job or their house or their spatial situation. On top of that, I am working on. I'm on the process of buying a piece of land with 2 houses in a state of ruin, and that also will give me, which is probably the final piece that will allow me to achieve writing in a different way, on a more committed and constant way, which is a room of my own, a space in which I can lock myself up and only write and not think about anything else. Perhaps when that is achieved, then it will be much easier to write with certain kind of constancy, but I'm not going to become a sedentary person, because that's not on my life bucket list or anything like that. I will be there and I will be repairing this house by my own means and with my own hands and with a few friends. And I will be writing while I am there, like I am writing everywhere where I go. Writing has genuinely been the only constant of my life. But that doesn't mean that then, once the house is done, I'm just gonna live there until I die. As I said, I am very single-minded when it comes to the projects that I pursue. I can have up to 3 projects, but whenever it's more than 3 is way too many. At the moment, I am on the process of buying this house, finishing university. I have side projects like, the Hegel Read Along and writing the novel for the writing collective that Steve has, which is another exercise of practice for and just playful enjoyment of writing. But in terms of major projects, I have a university, I have buying that house, and something else, some major bureaucratic thing that I'm doing for someone else, but I cannot talk about that. So if I were to add another thing to that would be too much. Having that house will reduce the amount of projects that I need to be doing, because I won't have to be worrying about rent or anything like that. But again, because I have other pursuits that have nothing to do with writing, it means that sometimes I have to suspend writing. So rather than be a person who writes 1,000 words every single day, I might be a person who, sails across the world for a couple of years and then comes back and writes for a couple of years, and then goes to, I don't know, somewhere else and makes a documentary and writes a script, and then comes back and does something else. Like, I try to do as many things as I can, to live as many lives as I can, and to carry along writing with me. But carrying along writing with me means that there has to be a balance between both things. I cannot make it fully my only priority because I don't want to be a public intellectual. I don't want to be just a writer. I don't want to be just anything. And that maybe brings a little bit the theme of constancy versus chaos, or discipline versus disorder or instability. There's many different types of discipline and many different types of constancy and types of chaos and instability. I don't think that anyone is fully constant or fully chaotic. And you just have to choose in which ways to be constant, in which ways to be chaotic. I would not be here. I genuinely would not be here if I wasn't disciplined and constant. Steve was saying that if you don't write every single day, then you are by definition not constant. If you don't write the same way that someone approaches a full-time job, then you are not constant. I understand that he means you are not a constant writer. That doesn't mean that you are not disciplined. You can be disciplined in many other ways. My life might feel unstable to you. To you people, booktube acquaintances and friends and everything. Because of the parts of it that I present, because you see me one day on the desert, another day talking about a book, the next day, on a sailboat or whatever. And it looks like I'm just like up and down and I don't know when to stop. But the truth is that the only way that I can maintain those things on a healthy way for a decade now, I've been doing this for more than a decade, is because I have certain things that I am fully constant, certain habits that keep me afloat. Exercise, some sort of introspective activity that allows me to catch up and maintain a certain continuity in terms of my awareness of where I am and what I'm doing, would be two of those things. Certain also like habits, more like, the amount of hours that I sleep every day. So there is constancy. It's just not writing. Writing does not require that constancy at this moment in my life. It requires it when I am inside a project, when I'm doing something, right? At the moment, I am having certain kind of constancy, right? I am reading War and Peace, which I haven't stopped reading, and reading The Phenomenology of Spirit and a few more books. And yeah, sorry, I just got a call, so I got distracted. I can only be who I am by having a certain kind of chaos, by allowing myself that kind of freedom and jiggle room. That freedom will at some point translate, it does translate into the way I write, because writing is the one thing that I genuinely wanted to reflect the way I am. Which also means that whenever I become sedentary, whenever I stop and think and work on a longer project, my writing also becomes a lot more constant, and then I do longer projects. But I cannot be focusing on the way someone else wants me to write, or the way someone else considers writing as an activity, because then I would not be writing the thing that I want to write. And I live a life that is entirely my own, and I'm trying to write a book that is entirely my own. It's very freeing when someone really lives in that way, as if you were going to die, and most people doesn't. You realize that you are no longer doing things because you can't. It's all a matter of choosing. You realize that you can do anything. And that's been my case. I at some point I realized that there is absolutely nothing I cannot do. There are certain things that in terms of time, it would take my whole life for them to do. Like if I want to become an astrophysicist, that would mean that I have to spend the next decade working on it. And so it's more a matter of like, do you want to do it? Do you want it enough for what it's gonna cost you? And do you want to do it because do you think that you should do it, or do you agree with the act of doing it? And with writing, I chose not to do it first. At first I chose to do it, right? And I grew up writing, a lot more writing than reading. And then I realized of the way I was writing and how it was conditioned by certain things and how it came through not in the way that I wanted to be. So I stopped writing. I chose to stop writing. I wasn't, oh, I lost inspiration. Oh, writing is no longer for me. No. I just chose to stop writing in order to stop focusing on just um, throwing myself into the world and starting to receive and learn a little bit, and retrospectively also make a bit of introspection about the way I was writing and what was conditioning the way I was writing, and examining the whole thing. And then I started writing again in a more casual way. I began a different kind of life, a better kind of life, and I began to travel and everything, and that meant that writing was, like I was like constantly writing travel journals or poems inspired by the moment, and that was also a form of writing, and it was also a choice. It was not like, oh, I cannot write every day like I used to do when I was 17. I I did that. I carried writing. Generally, has been the only constant in my life, as I said, and it has that means that it has to adapt to every single moment. The only way that I can both live a life that is not just a writer's life, but a complete full life, is that the way I write has to change as I move forward in time, as my phenomenological context and landscape changes, and that's it. That frees me from both a sense of duty to publish, or any sort of like, I don't feel like I have a moral duty to publish. I feel like, and this is something that I feel like it's a good closing point, because I feel like it's something that maybe we ignored just in the conversation. I think Steve doesn't give it as much importance as it should have, which is that yes, you should write. Yes, you should create something that in some way is gives back. We all come to the world and we all want to take and take and take, and every now and then we want to give back. So we should give back. And what you write, you cannot determine how it will be, but you can do as much damage as you can do good. Like, writing can also have a negative impact. And I you don't have a lot of control over how what you write will have an impact, or how you are in the world will have an impact, but it definitely can. So for me, much more than having a duty to publish, is first you have a duty to be honest and to yourself and in your writing, and you have a duty to publish only when that honesty and whatever you are actually wanting to write and whatever you are actually wanting to say is worth listening, and you really feel like it's worth reading, and that decision is yours. Once you publish, it's no longer your decision, but before you publish, it is your decision, and whatever decisions you make before publishing are on you. So I think that we often look at people who doesn't publish as oh, you think you can't, let me teach you how, and not so much as people who just chooses not to. For me, not publishing was definitely, I could have published. I could be a widely read writer in Spain if I wanted. I grew up having plenty of people coming to listen to my poems. I for a while I was like a small personality in a town with a few hundred people that would come to my poetry readings. So I could definitely have profited from that and published. I chose not to. I didn't think I couldn't. I wasn't lazy not to do it. I thought I went through the whole thing, and I considered it to the very last moment. But at the end of the day, I chose not to because of that, because I felt like this wasn't the book. Not that the only book that I will publish will be that one book that I talked about, but definitely for me to publish something as a writer, for anyone to publish something, I genuinely think that they should be able to be sure that they can stand by what they wrote, be completely happy about it. And until then, you can write, you don't have to publish. So those are my thoughts. I have many more, but I think this video is long enough, longer than I expected it to be. And yeah, let me know what are your thoughts about writing. How do you approach? What do you want to write? What kind of writer does that make you? What kind of duties you feel like you have as a writer, and what kind of things or concessions you are not willing to make. I can't make certain concessions when it comes to writing, because that would change the kind of writer that I am, and it would make me write the kind of book that I don't want to write. That being said, I'll see you on the other side. Thank you, BookTube.